HOA Karen demolished my fence, then learned it was worth more than her house. It all started with a simple disagreement, one that many homeowners face when living in a community governed by a homeowners association, HOA. I never thought this would turn into the kind of story I would end up sharing. But here we are. I just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, looking for some peace and quiet after a chaotic few years in the city. The house was modest but had everything I needed. A small yard, a two-car garage, and, most importantly, a privacy fence. It wasn't the most elaborate structure, but it was functional, wooden with a few vertical slats, but it provided much-needed privacy from the neighbors behind me. Everything seemed fine. That was until I met Karen. Now, Karen is one of those names that people often associate with entitled, overly aggressive people who think the world revolves around them, and in this case, it couldn't be more fitting. She was a member of the HOA, and I first encountered her one afternoon when she knocked on my door. She introduced herself as Karen, smiled tightly, and then, without preamble, told me that my fence violated HOA guidelines. I was confused. The rules she referenced were about fence height and material, but my fence was within all the guidelines, at least that's what I had been told when I moved in. She didn't care. She claimed the fence was unsightly and would need to come down immediately. When I asked her for any written notices or specific violations, she simply said, "You'll be hearing from us. I've already sent the request to the board." I was dumbfounded. She didn't even offer a real solution, just a demand that I remove the fence. I tried to stay calm and explained that I'd follow the rules, but I was in no rush. I was not about to take down something that cost me thousands of dollars and, frankly, was no one's business unless it truly violated the community guidelines. Over the next few weeks, Karen became increasingly aggressive, showing up at all hours with the same demand. Her tone was often condescending, and it quickly became clear she wasn't going to back down. But I wasn't about to give in. One day, I arrived home from work to find that the fence had been demolished, completely torn down, with chunks of it lying in my yard. I stood there, stunned, trying to process what had happened. Couldn't believe it. Someone had taken it upon themselves to destroy my property. And then I saw her. Karen was standing in front of the wreckage, hands on her hips, wearing a smug smile. "It's been taken care of," she said. "I couldn't wait any longer for you to comply with the HOA's rules, so I took the liberty of removing it for you." "You're welcome." I was livid. I called the police immediately, and they arrived within the hour. Karen, however, didn't seem to be concerned. She repeated that she was within her rights as an HOA member, and since my fence was a violation, she had taken appropriate action. The officer wasn't impressed, and after a brief conversation, Karen quickly realized that she had crossed a line. You see, Karen didn't just demolish my fence. She destroyed a very valuable piece of property. What she didn't know, what none of the HOA members knew, was that the fence was not just any ordinary fence. It wasn't some low-cost, run-of-the-mill structure. This fence was a custom job, made with high-end materials sourced from a company specializing in luxury outdoor installations. The wood, treated and stained to perfection, had been imported from a rare species of oak, and the posts were reinforced with steel supports. In fact, the entire fence was worth well over $30,000. I had spent more on that fence than some people spend on their entire house. And when I had it installed, I had an appraisal done. I knew it was a unique addition to the property, something that would add value and aesthetic appeal to my home. So, when Karen took it down, she not only destroyed my property, she'd cost me a small fortune. The situation quickly escalated. I contacted a lawyer and we started building a case. The HOA had no idea what was coming, and neither did Karen. They were all in for a rude awakening. In the meantime, Karen started to feel the pressure. My lawyer sent a letter to her, and one to the HOA, demanding that they reimburse me for the damages. Of course, they initially balked. The HOA claimed it was all done in good faith, as they thought the fence violated community rules. They also tried to argue that the fence was unauthorized, but that quickly fell apart once the appraisal came in. Karen, however, wasn't so confident. Word got around the neighborhood, and it became clear that she had made a huge mistake. The neighbors who had once been intimidated by her now saw her for what she was, an overzealous, power-hungry HOA enforcer who had no regard for property rights. The HOA board began to pressure her to settle the matter quickly, but Karen dug in her heels. She didn't want to back down. Her pride was at stake. The situation reached a boiling point when we finally went to court. The judge, after hearing the facts, sided with me. Karen's actions were not just a violation of property rights. They were an act of vandalism and destruction of personal property. The court ordered the HOA to pay me back the full amount for the fence, and Karen was personally liable for the damages. But the real twist came when Karen learned just how much that fence was worth. When the appraisal documents were presented, Karen's face turned white. She had no idea what she had destroyed. As it turned out, the value of my fence was far more than her house. In fact, the fence alone was worth more than her entire property by a significant margin. The irony was palpable. At the time of the court ruling, Karen had been living in a small, aging home that was barely worth $25,000, just a fraction of the $30,000 value of the fence she had torn down. The court ordered her to pay a portion of the restitution, but it became clear that she would never be able to afford the damages, let alone pay back the full amount. In the end, Karen lost her position in the HOA, and her reputation in the neighborhood was ruined. The neighborhood, once divided by her authoritarian tactics, came together, and the HOA was restructured. Karen, meanwhile, had to sell her house to pay off the damages. As for me, I got my fence back. The HOA, under new leadership, even helped me rebuild it to the exact same standards, and I received a formal apology from the association for the way things were handled. But the best part? Karen had to watch as her own life, and the house she had clung to so tightly, was reduced to nothing more than a painful reminder of her arrogance. Meanwhile, I had the last laugh. My fence, worth more than her house, stood tall, a symbol of both my victory and her failure.